Oh, we are live. Okay. I guess it fixed itself.
Cool. Have fun.
So you pop out
Thank
now. Thank you,
you.
Ben,
Bye.
for helping us with our technical difficulties. All right. I'm going to just send a message in our Discord server to let everyone know we are officially live. Well, hello to everyone who may be watching now or in the future. Thank you for joining us for another live stream discussion. We know this one had a bit of an unconventional start. We were having some technical difficulties, so we weren't sure if we were going to be able to start the live stream or not, but we are now officially live to talk about picture book illustration. So let's start by introducing ourselves. I am your host, AJ Easterday. I am the live stream coordinator for the Columbus Cartoon Coalition. And I have some knowledge of picture books. I took a whole course in college about picture book illustration, and now I work as a youth services assistant at a public library where one of the main things I'm in charge of is actually making and running story times. So I have lots of experience reading books to children and have read hundreds of picture books. As part of my job, I've also taken courses on early literacy and picture books. So I feel like I have a decent amount of knowledge in this area. And here with me, we also have Emily. Emily, would you like to introduce yourself and talk about why you are here?
Hello, I'm Emily Cooke. I am a CCC member. I also work with kids and read picture books to them almost every single day. So you could say I'm a bit of a connoisseur. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, no, that's perfectly fine. Awesome. So first, let's talk about like kind of what are picture books? Why are we here? Why would this group, which is a comics focused group, want to talk about picture books? Well, because if you think about it, picture books actually are a kind of comic art. I actually pulled up Scott McCloud's definition of comics because if you read it, you'll realize picture books totally fit the definition. Scott McCloud, who is a famous comic scholar, defines comics as juxtaposed pictorial and other images in deliberate sequence intended to convey information and or to produce an aesthetic response in the viewer. And picture books totally match this, right? It's a bunch of pictures in a deliberate sequence to tell a story. The main reason we don't think of them as comics is because they usually don't have that panel storytelling that we typically see in traditional comics, but they are a form of sequential art. They have a lot in common with the traditional comics that you might be used to reading or drawing. So my first question for you, Emily, is like, what are some other similarities between picture books and comics that you can think of?
Um, there's a lot of different ways that you can, present comics or picture books. Lots of different art styles you can use, different ways that you can like format text. Um, Again, it's like images and words, and they come together to create a story or tell information. um it's like a marriage of uh illustration and writing.
Yeah. I think that's a perfect way of putting it, but I will add the caveat that in both comics and picture books, it's possible to have wordless ones.
True.
So it is typically a marriage of pictures and words. And actually, all the examples of books that I brought today are pictures and words together, because that's definitely the most common. But it is possible to tell a story through pictures alone. But if it's told through words alone, then it's not a picture book or comic at all. The pictures are kind of the core thing that make it part of the comics medium.
Mm-hmm.
So another thing that I wanted to point out, I have actually a book here to help me illustrate this. This is Hotel Bruce by Ryan T. Higgins. It's part of the Mother Bruce series. And it's a really good example of how picture books use a lot of the same visual language that comics do. So, I mean, for one thing, this uses a pretty like cartoony drawing style that you might also find in children's comics. But what I really wanted to point out is that similar to comics, we can have speech bubbles.
Mm-hmm.
And we can have captions. And we can have sound effects. Let me find a page that has good sound effects. So here, where they're having the pillow fight, there's like squawking noises because it's a bunch of geese having a pillow fight. So a lot of those like things that seem like they're unique to comics, like word balloons, thought balloons, sound effects. A lot of those can appear in picture books too. They don't have to, but they can. So that is another thread that you'll see in common between the two. So now let's then talk about the flip side is what are some things that might make picture books different from your traditional comics?
I think one thing is like comics tend to be in like panels and boxes, kind of like contained. Well, a lot of time in picture books, the images take up like the whole page. Like, you know, sometimes they can be like in those little boxes, but usually it's like most of or like the whole page without you know, like being boxed in.
Yes. I'm going to see if I can find an example here. I actually don't know if this... Oh, here we go. So the book I'm holding up now is Will the Pigeon Graduate by Mo Willems, part of his Pigeon book series. So this is a good example of a book that, like, most of it is what you were just talking about. It's one big picture per page. And I would say this is how most picture books are illustrated. But you do occasionally have picture books where you have multiple pictures in a page, and sometimes they're even boxed in like panels. So actually, if I turn to the very next page in this book, you can see this is made up of a bunch of panels, basically. So once again, picture books do sometimes use that same visual language that comics do. This is also a good example of a picture book that uses different kinds of speech balloons. And when the pigeon is like angry and yelling, his word balloons will like change different shapes. See if I can find a good example. Actually, that page that I was just on, like, this is a funky shaped word balloon, and it's because the pigeon is panicked and he's yelling, and it's in all caps. So similar to how like fonts will change and speech bubbles will change in comics whenever a character is yelling or expressing themselves differently, the same thing is true in picture books. You can do that same kind of thing.
Yeah, if I can also share an example. I have Angelina's Birthday story by Catherine Holabird, illustrations by Helen Craig. And on some pages, if you can see, it is like, several images in like little boxes. But there's also pages where the illustration just takes up like the entire page.
Yeah, and in that example that you just showed, it's even a double page spread, which you do sometimes see in a lot of picture books. In fact, I would say that double page spreads are really common in picture books, a lot more than they are in comics. So yes. Another thing that I feel is a difference that I wanted to bring up, because it actually also relates to a question we got in the Discord server, is about the size and format of picture books. One of the questions that we got was like, how do you go about formatting a picture book in regards to things like size or how many words to put on a page? And this is something I feel like separates picture books from traditional comics as well, because if you go to a comic book store and pick up a new comic on the shelf, chances are, no matter if it's published by Marvel or DC or Image or someone else, it's going to be pretty much the exact same size. And it's going to be kind of that profile orientation as opposed to landscape. They're all kind of roughly the same ratio and orientation. But that does not have to be true for picture books. We have some that are more landscape orientation like this. We have some that are square. We have some that are taller and in the profile orientation. So they come in all sorts of sizes. Similarly, you can have ones that are really small. You can have ones that are really big. There are no rules when it comes to picture book sizes or formats. So if you are actually thinking of creating a picture book and you don't know what size to make it, there are a couple things to think about. If you are working with a publisher, they'll probably tell you what size you need to make it. But if you are planning on self-publishing it, then you'll have to do research into different printers and see what sizes the printer offers. But otherwise, there's almost no limits to what sizes it can be. If you're like a little unsure what size you want your book to be or what kind of orientation, like if you want to make it landscape or profile or something like that, I would say bigger is better, because you can always shrink down your artwork and still have it look high quality. But if you accidentally start by making your artwork too small and then you want to print it into a bigger book, that's not going to work. And of course, you can think about, like, depending on the individual story that you want to write, like, would it make sense to have big landscape illustrations, or would it make more sense to maybe have it be tall and skinny? Depending on the kind of book you're writing, there might be one size that just works better than the other.
Yeah, I've also seen picture books that are just like funky shapes. Like they don't even have to be rectangles.
That's absolutely true. Like when it comes to the realm of picture books too, I didn't bring any examples, but I mean, you have like pop-up books and board books and like books where like parts are cut out. So there really is like no limit to the kind of picture book you can make. As I said, it maybe just depends on the limitations of like the publisher or printer that you're working with, because they might give you strict guidelines that you have to adhere to. But it is possible, right? And actually, before we get too far, since I mentioned board books, I did kind of want to make sure I mention that there are a couple subcategories of picture books that a lot of the illustration tips that we'll talk about today also apply to. So board books is one of them. For anyone who's unfamiliar of the term board book, that refers to a kind of picture book where all of the pages are literally cardboard. Because it's made of cardboard, it's typically got a very low page count and is small in size because, of course, cardboard is more expensive to print on than regular paper, so you can only use so much of it.
Yeah, I might have one.
That would be great because I unfortunately did not grab an example board book to show, but they're very easy to spot because if it's got cardboard pages, you know it's a board book.
Yes, this one.
Yes, so that's an example. So if you actually look at it from the size, you can see those are pretty thick pages.
Mm-hmm.
So they are actually like made from board as opposed to a regular paper. And the reason board books exist is those books are typically meant for really young children, like infants from birth to age 3, because at that age, they're going to be playing around with the book a lot. And it could get a lot of wear and tear. So if they were using a regular picture book, they might rip all those pages out. Whereas if you have a book that is literally like made from a sturdy cardboard, it can go through a lot more before those kids destroy it. And then the other like subcategory of picture book that I wanted to acknowledge, and this one I do have examples of, are easy readers. So this is a category of book that is meant for kids learning how to read. So they're almost like an in-between stage between picture books and chapter books. These are meant mostly for kids to read themselves, so that they can learn how to read. They're typically, for that reason, at a very easy reading level, hence the term easy reader. They actually do tend to be more standardized. Like I brought the 3 examples here and they're all the same size. So it's one of the reasons you can kind of tell if it's an easy reader, if it's about this size. They will usually also say things like, you know, I can read, and they might have a level associated with them, which lets you know like how hard of a reading level it is. Whereas the other picture books we're looking at, those are more intended for an adult to read to their children. So there is a bit of a difference there. Part of the reason these easy readers too are this size is because they're meant to feel more like a novel. Like I said, these are intended for kids who are getting ready to read chapter books. And so this is the perfect size for a kid to hold it themselves and turn the pages themselves so that they learn that process. You know, part of what makes picture books a very important category of books. So these are often the books that children use to learn how to read. And learning to read doesn't just mean learning to read the words, but also being able to interpret the pictures, get reading comprehension, and even learning how to turn pages can be really hard for young kids. So all of these books kind of have those things in mind of like, we are preparing kids to become readers.
Mm-hmm.
So now that I've gotten that, now that I've gone through the different kinds of picture books, the other thing I wanted to acknowledge was all the different art styles that picture books can come in. Not that comic books that you find in the comic store don't come in different art styles as well, but I feel like we kind of all have an image in our head of like the typical comic style, especially if it's a genre like superhero comics. Like superheroes tend to have a look to them. Even middle grade graphic novels tend to kind of have a look to them. Whereas with picture books, there is no one look. There's all sorts of different looks. So I wanted to pull out some other examples that I have here that showcase some of the different art styles. I have another Mo Willems book because I can never get enough of Mo Willems. But this one I thought was interesting because he draws very cartoony characters. But for this book, which is called Knuffle Bunny, all of the cartoon images are on black and white photo backgrounds. So he uses real photos and draws the characters on top of them, which creates for a really interesting, like, mixed media reading experience. Then we have something more like this, which is kind of a lineless painting style that's pretty unique. So it's still very like cartoonish, but it has a very different look from it because, like I said, it's lineless. It's a lot of flat color. It has you probably can't see it in the through the camera, but it has a texture in it that makes me think that the illustrations in this might be hand painted. I don't know for sure. But this one is called The Bear Out There by Jess Hannigan. And then I also wanted to share one of my personal favorite picture books, Stella Luna by Janelle Cannon. This one's a classic, but once again, a totally different art style because this one is much more photorealistic. So those are three wildly different art styles that I wanted to show off. Emily, do you happen to have any examples with you that you want to show off?
Mm-hmm. One I have the Velveteen Rabbit. This style is very soft. I think it's mostly like drawn with colored pencil and maybe watercolor. Yeah, it's just yeah, you can definitely see that there's like texture on it. And then I have A Pocket Full of Kisses, which is painted.
Very cute.
Yeah, it looks like it might be painted with like acrylics or gouache. There's like a lot of detail in it. And if I can show one more, Honey Honey Lion.
Ooh, by Jan Brett. She's a great one.
Mm-hmm. This is also a painting, and the format of this one is actually really cool because you have like the main pages, but then on the side are these little like portraits. And as you go throughout the book, it'll show like a different animal in them. So like the main page is talking about like, you know, the story. And then there's a guinea hen. And then the guinea hen is talking to some creature, I'm not sure what. And then that creature is talking to an elephant. It just keeps going like that. And also the borders are like so beautiful and detailed.
Yes. I would definitely say for anyone in the audience who wants an example of an artist who has like a really detailed, intricate, and beautiful art style that is clearly like hand drawn, Jan Brett is a great example. Mm-hmm. She does a lot of like fairy tale retellings as well. So if you're into that, it's a good recommendation. Awesome. So I wanted to show off all these different art styles to give our audience, like let our audience see that there really is no limit to what you can do in picture books. So if you are thinking of like experimenting with a different art style, or you want to do something that's a little out of the box, if you want to try out, making a story with collage or photos or paintings, you can do all of that in picture books. I've even seen picture books where the illustrations are made of like paper cutouts, and cool stuff like that. So there really is no limit. So I think that's one of the things that makes it really cool and really great. So now let's transition to our next question, which was submitted in our Discord server, which are, what are some of the different things you have to take in account when creating picture books for different age groups?
Oh, first thing is just the reading level. Like the books that you showed earlier, like the I Can Read, that actually has numbers of the level on them. And if you want like the child to be able to read it by themselves, or have like an adult read it to them. And also like how simple, because like usually like the younger the audience, the more simple the words will be, both like the words themselves and like how long the sentences are. Whereas for like, older age groups, you can get more detailed and use like more like difficult words. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, I think that's a one myth that I do kind of want to dispel, when it comes at least to like writing a picture book in this case, and like what kind of words you can use. I do think there are some people who are so afraid to use big words because they think like, oh, this is aimed at children, I can't use big words, I have to make sure to use words that they know. But actually, kids coming across big words in picture books is part of how kids learn new words and expand their vocabulary. So it actually is a good thing for picture books to occasionally contain words that the kids won't know. As long as they can figure it out through context clues, then that's great. Especially if we're talking about like this kind of picture book, which is meant more for an adult to be reading to a child, then it's okay to use those big words that they don't know, because the adult who's reading it will know it. But you're right that if you are more doing what is considered an easy reader and you want the child to be able to read it themselves, then you have to be a lot more careful about your word choice. I will also add, because we probably have some people watching this who are more interested in the illustration side than the writing side. You also have to keep this in mind when drawing. How you actually draw your pictures is also going to depend on the age group you're thinking of, because young children are only going to really be able to understand simple, very direct imagery. Reading pictures is actually a skill all in itself. So if you're aiming for a younger group, say like infant to 3 years old, or even like infant to 4 years old, you want the images to be simple, easy to read, and you also kind of want to avoid having sequences that are like lots of pictures with no words. Because I feel like a lot of people don't realize that sometimes pictureless, or not pictureless, wordless picture books can actually be really hard for that young age group to understand, because they just don't yet have the reading comprehension skills to read the pictures without having the words there to follow it up. So if you're planning on having any wordless sequences in your picture book, or doing an entirely wordless book, I would say definitely aim that more for like ages 5 and up. So yeah, even the complexity of the pictures will depend on your age group. I will say, keep in mind the categories that we were talking about earlier, the board book versus easy reader versus picture book, because that will give you good guidelines. The other thing to keep in mind is, of course, picture books come in all different levels as well. There are picture books that are more suited to toddlers, and picture books that are more suited to kindergartners, and picture books that are more suited to upper elementary school. And I would say it has somewhat to do with the reading level of the book, but actually has a lot more to do with their attention spans. Like a long picture book is going to be meant more for that like elementary school level, because a toddler is not going to be able to sit through that whole book. Actually, since Stella Luna was brought up a few times, this is a book that has some pages that are filled with lots of words. I would not read this to a 3-year-old because they would get bored and leave before I was even halfway through. For a toddler, something like Will the Pigeon Graduate would be much more appealing. It's only got a few words per page. It's a very quick, easy read that is going to work better for a toddler's attention span. So those are definitely some of the things to keep in mind. But if we didn't fully answer that question, feel free to ask more questions, more follow-up questions in the chat. So the next question I have is, how do you actually go about pursuing a job in picture book illustration if this is something you are interested in actually doing as a career, or you want to try out making an actual picture book? Well, it kind of depends. In order to illustrate a picture book, you have to have first written one. And something that comics and picture books have in common is sometimes you have a writer illustrator who is doing the whole thing themselves, or you have a separate artist and writer. So actually, a lot of the examples I have here are writer illustrators. They do the whole thing themselves. Stella Luna is all Janelle Cannon. This is all Jess Hannigan. Mo Willems is an author illustrator who typically does it all himself, but it's worth pointing out that Mo Willems has occasionally worked with other illustrators who have illustrated his stories. But this book that I have here, Becoming Boba, which is a very cute new book about bubble tea. It's adorable. This was written by, let me double check that I have this right. Yes. So Joanna Ho is the author of this one, and Amber Wren is the illustrator. So if you are planning on doing all of the writing and illustrating yourself, then you can come up with a picture book pitch where you've written the whole thing yourself and you pitch yourself as the author illustrator. But if you are someone who is strictly an artist and you don't do the writing, but you still want to get into this industry, there's kind of 2 ways you can break into it. You can either find a writer that you team up with to work on a project together and develop a project from scratch. Or there are some times where publishers know they have a picture book project already and are looking for illustrators that they can put on that project. So they'll look for freelance illustrators. So in that case, you can just make it known online that you are interested in picture book illustration. Definitely have an illustration portfolio available online that shows what you're capable of, that gets an idea of your art style. You can let it be known on places like LinkedIn or other social media sites that you are willing to do picture book illustration, that's something you are seeking. And if you are interested in picture book illustration, I would say that's something that a lot of people looking for illustrators want to see, is that you can do a variety of illustration. Like, they probably don't want someone who just draws people. they probably want someone who can draw people and animals and landscapes and backgrounds, and all sorts of things. You might have to draw cartoon boba for your picture book. So they want to make sure you can do that. It actually is worth pointing out that like lots of picture books are about non-human characters. So to be a picture book illustrator, being able to draw inanimate objects really well and animals and creatures, different creatures and things like that is actually a very valuable skill in this industry. So that's something to practice and make sure you have in your portfolio if this is something you are interested in. Emily, do you have anything to add to that?
No.
Okay. Okay. So now I just want to ask, what are some of your favorite picture books? You may have already shown some off, but for anybody watching who is looking to read some more picture books, wants to do research into the different like art styles and like what's out there, what would you recommend?
Well, I showed off Jan Brett, Honey Honey Lion, and A Pocket Full of Kisses, and Velveteen Rabbit. I don't have it with me, but one series that I like is Pig the Pug.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
That one has very... The art style is kind of funky. Good Night Moon, which is a classic.
It is a classic. For those of you who don't know, part of the reason that Goodnight Moon is considered like one of the best picture books ever is it has every sound that exists in the English language in it. So it's actually like really good for children's language development because it has every sound in the English language that they need to learn.
Cool. It's from 1947.
Yeah, a classic for sure.
The If You Give a Mouse a Cookie series. I have If You Take a Mouse to School by Laura Numeroff, illustrated by Felicia Bond.
Yeah. That's a great recommendation.
There's, of course, Dr. Seuss.
I actually brought a Dr. Seuss example too. I figured he was worth talking about because, of course, he's a classic, one of the most well-known picture book illustrators. But I also, because we're a comics group, I wanted to point out, in case you didn't know, that Dr. Seuss got his start drawing comic strips. So this is like a really famous example of someone who went from cartooning to picture book illustration. So you can too. Oh, we have Chandu in the comments here recommending the Llama Llama series.
Yeah,
I love the Llama Llama series. The artwork is beautiful. It's like these traditionally done oil paintings that are amazing, but the stories themselves are also really good. They're all rhyming stories. So they make great read alouds, have a great rhythm to it. And the stories also teach good lessons. Pretty much every book has like a nice little lesson in it. So I do recommend the Llama Llama series by Anna Dewdney. Did you have any others?
Not that I can think of.
Okay. I didn't want to think that I was interrupting. So I've held this up before, but this is Today I Will Fly by Mo Willems. I mentioned Mo Willems a lot today because really there's no author illustrator I could recommend more than Mo Willems. He is basically like the face of the contemporary picture book illustration, like picture book industry. He's someone who's still working today. He's worked in many different art styles and done many different kinds of picture books, and they're all extremely successful. His Elephant and Piggy series is definitely one of his most popular. It's just these like very simple illustrations of these elephant and pig characters on a blank background, and all the text is word balloons, and that's all it is. And yet they tell the cutest little stories. So highly recommend. And then, of course, I brought my boy Paddington. This is Paddington at the Barbershop by Michael Bond, illustrated by R.W. Alley. I'm a huge Paddington fan, so of course I'm going to recommend the Paddington books. And I specifically love the ones that are illustrated by R.W. Alley. There have been a couple different illustrators that have worked on Paddington, but R.W. Alley is my favorite. The illustrations look like they are traditionally done with ink and watercolor, and like they're beautiful. They have amazing texture. So that's a great example. I also want to shout out the Pete the Cat series by James and Kimberly Dean. That's a classic that remains really popular today, and I believe those creators are also still actively working today. I have so many more recommendations. If anybody out there wants some specific picture book recommendations in a particular art style, or particular genre, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Because I read picture books all the time for my job, and I have a log. I actually keep track of all the picture books I read too, so that I can remember them specifically to recommend them to people. So yeah, don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or want more recommendations. I guess on that note, I should go ahead and shout out our Discord channel. If you have any more questions for me, you want to chat with me or chat with us as a group, please join the C3 Discord. The link is there.
Mm-hmm.
And now that we've kind of gotten through that, that was actually all the questions that I'd prepared in advance. I know we have a couple people watching live. So if you have any last questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll try to answer them before we leave.
Yeah. If I could add something, I just realized one of the Dr. Seuss books I held up, it's not by Dr. Seuss. But
Right,
what?
that's P.D. Eastman, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And this one's really cool because it's in English and Spanish.
Yes, it's actually fairly common to find bilingual picture books. So that's actually really good, particularly if you have kids who are learning multiple languages.
Yeah. I've had this since I was probably like 1 or 2 years old. My nanny, when I was a wee child, she was, I believe, from what, Sully? Sorry, my dog is barking. I believe she was from Mexico, and she would talk to my sister and I in Spanish. So there was a point in our lives where we would talk mostly in Spanish. And I'm pretty sure that this is one of the books that she got for us to help learn Spanish.
Yeah, that's cool. I actually, strangely enough, have a similar experience because I also had a nanny growing up who was from Mexico and would speak Spanish with us. I also went to a French immersion school for like my first few years in school. So I grew up learning Spanish and French. So I had a bunch of picture books growing up in Spanish and French. And I think I still have a few of them, though not a ton. But actually, like, I guess as a bonus tip, if you are interested in learning another language or you're like teaching your child another language, picture books are a great way to help learn new languages, especially because there are so many picture books that focus on like learning new vocabulary, or they have like the bilingual text where they show the text in 2 different languages so that you can compare them. So yeah, very cool bonus fact about picture books. All right. Well, I don't see any additional questions that came in, so we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Once again, I want to say if you do have any additional questions or you just want to join the Columbus Cartoon Coalition and meet the other members of the group and get to talk about comics all the time, please join our Discord. You can also Follow us on Instagram here at c3.ohio. As we frequently post on social media when we have an event or project or something special coming up. So you'll definitely want to check us out there. We also have a graphic novel book club. If you are specifically interested in reading graphic novels and discussing them with the group, then you'll want to join this Discord linked below. I actually do not have the date pulled up for the next graphic novel book club meeting. That's on me. But our book for this month is, you know what? I actually think the meeting is tomorrow. We are reading Dragon Ball, and I think the meeting is tomorrow. So if you're interested in hearing thoughts about Dragon Ball, even if you haven't read it yourself yet, you can join us for that. And then, of course, I want to thank Emily for being here. Emily, you can tell the audience where they can find you.
Yeah, my socials are Antipolargy Art.
Awesome.
I got Instagram and Tumblr, and I recently joined this place called Artful, Artfol, which is a cool artist website.
That is really neat. I have not actually heard of that one. Okay. And once again, I'm AJ. You can find all my socials at this link tree. I am mostly on Instagram at AJ Easterday 8, but you can also find me on Tumblr and Threads and Blue Sky and a variety of places. So thank you so much for everyone who watched. We really hope you learned something about how picture books are created and all the things that make them both similar and a little bit different from your traditional comics that you might be used to. And that is all for now. Bye, everyone.
Bye.